Today we have assembled to release a booklet written by Brigadier R.P. Singh and Mr. Hitesh Singh. We are grateful to have Ambassador and Professor Ma'am Veena Sekhri ji with us and Mr. Farid Hussain. The booklet is about, you can say, the genocide which took place in Bangladesh. At that time it was East Pakistan. From March 1971 to December 1971, till Indian forces interfered and defeated Pakistani forces, and Bangladesh became an independent nation on 16th of December 1971. Our guest of honor today, Ambassador Veena Sekhri, is an alumni of Delhi University. She did her masters in economics. In 1970, she got the first position in the competitive exams, which we know as civil services, conducted by UPSC, and joined Indian Foreign Service. She has held diplomatic assignments in erstwhile USSR, India's permanent mission in UNO, Nepal, Hong Kong, besides holding other assignments. She was India's High Commissioner in Malaysia from 2000 to 2003 and India's High Commissioner in Bangladesh from 2003 to 2006, when she resigned from IFS after 36 years of meritorious service. Currently, she is Vice Chairperson, India chapter of the South Asia Foundation, SAF, a secular non-profit, non-political organization founded in 2000 by UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador Madanjeet Singh, comprising 8 autonomous chapters in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, ma'am, for sparing your precious time for us. Our second guest today is Mr. Farid Hussain. He is Minister Press at Bangladesh High Commission in India. He had been a journalist before joining this position in 2016. As a student of Dhaka University, he took part in the 1971 War of Liberation as a young political activist. After Bangladesh independence in 71, he returned to the university and obtained his master's in English literature. Then he began his career as a journalist in 1976. In 1981-82, he did a diploma in journalism at Indian Institute of Mass Communication, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for spending your time and giving us your precious time today. Coming to the topic of today's, you can say, booklet release, that is about, you can say, role of Pakistan Army in 1971 Bangladesh genocide. People have very short memories. Even in the, you can say, era of bombardment of information and very refined and very fast communication technology, we generally, you can say, worry about what is happening today or what happened yesterday. We forget what happened, you can say, few days ago, few years ago. There are many things which have been taught to people in India, in history, in modern history and others. But this particular genocide which took place in Bangladesh, it is something a lot many Indians are totally unaware of. For Indians, some Bangladeshi people came to India in 71 war and the government of India provided them, you can say, some relief camps and facilities. But what had actually happened in Bangladesh or East Pakistan at that time is something we need to, you can say, understand. And this particular effort by Brigadier R.P. Singh and Mr. Hitesh Singh to inform and to sensitize the readers about the barbaric, you can say, tendencies which appear and which took place not so long ago. It's hardly, you can say, less than 50 years ago, 48 years only. what had happened, we all know in 1947, India was divided. The western part, the Punjab and few other regions, Sindh, etc., became part of West Pakistan, and a part from the eastern India separated from Bengal, and that became East Pakistan. Interestingly, the the distance between East Pakistan and West Pakistan was more than 1,000 miles. It could be around, you can say, 1,600 to 1,700 kilometers. But people on both the sides wanted a separate nation on the basis of religion, and that's how Pakistan came into being. Bengal got divided. The, the linguistic unity in Bengal that got shattered, and the religious affinity became the paramount. But then, very soon, after Pakistan came into existence, after much of bloodshed, we all know about that. The people in the West Pakistan, they started treating the people from the East Pakistan as if they were inferior people. They were secondary citizens. Their demands, their language, their issues, their representation in the policy making, everything got ignored. And people in the East, they continued to agitate, they continued to raise their demands. In 1970, a nationwide election was 71, I probably, 70, 70, December 70, thank you, sir. Nationwide election in Pakistan took place, in which Awami League, led by Mujibur Rahman, got the maximum number of seats. In fact, it got the majority in the Pakistan parliament, and probably that was the first proper election in the history of Pakistan after it got independence, or in fact, it got freedom, came into existence. But the people in the western Pakistan, the Punjabis and others, they refused to give, you can say, transfer power to the people from the East Pakistan, despite, you can say, getting majority in the parliament. And this particular incident, you can say, it became a sort of tipping point. Uh, People in the East Pakistan, they have been demanding, you can say, that the language Bengali should be given the status, at least the second language status, because when Jinnah declared Urdu as the language, national language of Pakistan, hardly 3 to 4% people in Pakistan spoke that language. And here, the population was also more. In East Pakistan, there were 75 million people. In the West Pakistan, there were 55 million people. So people were more. Language was also popular. Representation was also there. Their cultural, their, not only that, in trade, in production, in industry, what we call the contribution to GDP was also much more. But the political power centered in the hands of people from the West Pakistan, not only in terms of political power, in terms of armed forces, authority and control also. So when Mujib was denied, you can say, his, what we call, what you can say is rightful uh, power to lead Pakistan, the Bengalis got agitated. There were agitations, there were some clashes also, and probably some people lost their lives in those clashes in the eastern part of Pakistan. The people in the west, the armed forces, the president Yahya Khan, the leader Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and the generals, they decided to teach a lesson to people in the East Pakistan, to the Bengalis. And people quote that a journal remarked that kill 3 million Bengalis and all of them will fall in line. 3 million, 30 lakh, imagine. They said, kill them. And that's how on the midnight of, you can say, between 25th and 26th, Operation Searchlight was initiated by Pakistani armed forces in the eastern part of Pakistan. And innocent people, students, intellectuals, lawyers, doctors, they were killed en masse. There are, you can say, conflicting reports, but thousands of people within few hours were killed by Pakistani armed forces. But then armed forces had the limitation in terms of numbers, in terms of reach, in terms of knowing the, you can say, hinterland. So they took help from the Islamic militias, Al-Badr and Al-Shams, Muslim League, which lost power to Awami League, Jamiyat, and other hardliners, some Maulanas, some other religious preachers. They also backed this genocide by Pakistani forces on Bengali people. Initially, they targeted and they wanted to kill and teach the lesson mainly to the Hindus living in the eastern Pakistan. And there are photographic evidence that's how Hindus were, you can say, taken to a side, and after inspecting whether they were circumcised or not, and they were killed on the spot. Hundreds and thousands of people were killed within few days. Millions of people were forced to run for safety to India. India had to provide relief, had to arrange for, you can say, camps, medicines, clothing, food. The worst part of this genocide was the genocidal rapes on the women. There are estimates that between 2 lakh to 4 lakh women were raped. And not merely raped, they were taken as sex slaves by Pakistani armies, by the Islamic militias, and they were gang raped for months, kept as hostages in the units, which led to unwanted pregnancies and unwanted deliveries also. It's a black dot on the face of, you can say, humanity. And the worst part was several countries, led by USA, kept on denying. Pakistani allies, they stood with Pakistan, despite, you can say, world media and some of the very, you can say, painful, hard-hitting reports by very courageous journalists highlighting the atrocities, the brutal murders, massacres. The powers in Washington didn't move. Finally, India had to intervene, troubled by influx of more than 1 crore refugees from eastern Pakistan. And as we know, within few days, Pakistani armed forces were defeated. Indian Army got support of Mukti Bahini, the freedom fighters from eastern parts of Pakistan. And that's how Bangladesh came into existence. Again, even after Bangladesh came into existence and when it applied for membership for United Nations, China didn't allow it. Bangladesh and Indian Army had prisoners of war, Pakistani armed forces, soldiers, and officers. And the newly formed government of Bangladesh, and definitely Bangladesh's people also, they wanted to punish those prisoners of war because they indulged in atrocities and massacre, this genocide of Bengali people. Majorly Hindus, but lot many Muslims also suffered at their hands. So this denial of United Nations membership and then capturing some of the Bengalis who were working or settled in the western parts of the Pakistan. Bangladesh was and Indian army was forced to release those prisoners of war so that the people captured in the western part could be released and they could again travel back to the eastern parts. All this happened only 48 years ago. We don't read much about it, we don't discuss about it. Even today, when we see such tendencies taking place in West Asia, elsewhere, we all know how Yazidi people were tortured and they suffered, particularly Yazidi women, at the hands of ISIS. We talk about, you can say, progress, we talk about our civilized society, our civil society, science, technology, global village, all sorts of things. But those tendencies of barbarianism are still there. And it's a big question mark before the humanity that the perpetrators of those crimes, of the genocide in Bangladesh in 1971 were never got punished. Can humanity, particularly the civil societies and the humanitarian organizations, put pressure on Pakistan to ensure that those people get punished? We have seen recently that people, even you can say in their 90s, were given punishment for their crimes, what they did under Hitler. This is not 1940s or 50s, we are talking about 1970s. Unless that happens, the humanity owes a lot to people, particularly those Viranganas, brave women, and the kids, children, innocent children, who suffered a lot in Bangladesh. Thank you very much. Now I would invite to say something.
So, I was involved in the Bangladesh Repression War from 26th of March till about 16th of December, different capacities. First of all, I was deployed on international border of India and East Pakistan on 26th of March 1971, and then 20th of April till about first week of July, I was involved in the looking after the refugees because the civil administration was not geared up to handle the so much of reflex of the people. After that, 1st of July till about 30th of November 1971, I was involved in I was instructor in infantry school in the officer training wing of Bangladesh. Then from 1st of December till about end of 16th of December, I was involved in the liberation of the Bangladesh war because I volunteered to fight for the Bangladeshis guerrillas. In 71, India had trained 1 lakh guerrillas, 3 brigades of the regular soldiers of East Pakistan, Bangladesh. During that time, it was kept a secret. Till today, it's a secret that we were helping the Pakistanis, helping the Bangladeshis. So, Till today, nobody knows about it. And when I was in the Mukti Baini camp, the refugee camp, sorry, I saw what a human being can do to another human being. When after being raped, were their vaginas were ruptured with the bannets of the rebels. People were made to see their daughters and their daughter-in-laws being raped in front of them. So similarly, people were taken out, the youth were collected and the blood was taken out of them. They drained out and their bodies were thrown in the rivers. You can't imagine what atrocities person can commit on the other human being. After that, I was instructor in Bangladesh Mukti Baini Officers Training Wing, where I trained 132 officers. In that, Sheikh Kamal, brother of Sheikh Hossein, was the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who was vice cadet. Now, as far as the Bangladeshis are concerned, they think that we are taking too much of credit for during the war. We helped them, but it was not Indian Army alone which fought the war. It was the Mukti Baini. Mukti Baini had fought for 255 days and they had completely destroyed all the infrastructure of the Indian Army, of the Pakistan Army. That's how we could roll up the whole thing in 12 days only. Now, as Dr. Athroy said, that there is a shame of the humanity that we have not taken up a case because we don't acknowledge in India. Nobody knows that it was killed and Mukti Baini was trained by us and we fought them. So I request to Hitesh to take over from here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I will not be speaking about the book. I mean, book is for everyone to read. I'll be speaking on a different facet of the war and genocide that has unfortunately not been given due attention. Till now, the focus has primarily been on the number of people killed and the debate between the skeptics and the witnesses on the veracity of these numbers. A larger question that needs to be looked into is the subconscious thinking of the people who carried out these killings, which has been completely ignored. It is not just the people who planned the genocide, namely Yahya Khan, who saw Operation Searchlight as an exercise that will enable him to retain power, or Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who famously justified the carnage by saying, I quote, it is for the preservation of unity, integrity, and the ideology of Pakistan. Or Tikka Khan, who saw this as an opportunity to add another star and further his career. But this should also include the people who actually carried out the killings on the ground. Because it was not the top brass of the Pakistani junta or the army that was directly involved in the face to face killings. An estimated number of deaths have been between 300,000 to 3 million. The figure 3 million deaths was speculated, citing the statement by President Yahya Khan on 22nd February 1971. And he said, I quote, kill 3 million of them and rest will eat out of our hands. Colonel Sajjad Zahir and Shahryar Kabir have been working on creating a directory for the civilian skill. They have worked painstakingly to collect the names of individuals who have died during the war. Nearly half of the victims have been accounted for. There is also information about 10 million people who had fled to India. This has already been mentioned, but there were also 30 million people who went from cities to the villages during this time. And out of 75 million people, more than half the population was either displaced or killed. And this was only in a period of 9 months. So even if we take out a median of 1.5 million deaths, the Bangladesh Liberation War would still be the deadliest genocide in the 20th century on account of the people who were killed on a daily basis. At this point, I would like all of you to think how many people would be involved in carrying out these killings. And I mean the people on the ground, not the planners. While trying to decipher these crimes, We are faced with two questions. What constituted the rank and file of the perpetrators? And second, what were the reasons for getting involved in these killings? The 1971 genocide can be broadly divided in two phases. In the first phase, almost all the killings were carried out by the army, and this started from the midnight of 26 March and ended in May 1971. The second phase started from June 1st when Yahya Khan, it was not Yahya Khan, it was Lieutenant General Tikka Khan who promulgated the ordinance of East Pakistan Razakars. The Razakars were further divided into Al Badrs and Al Shams, that's already been covered. But we need to understand the reasons for their hatred that allowed them to carry out these mass killings without showing any signs of moral dilemma. The primary target of the military junta were the Awami League leaders, workers, student division members, and supporters, the East Pakistan intelligentsia, and the Bengali Hindu population. Since the Hindus formed a sizable chunk of the population, it faced the maximum number of persecutions. Unlike their policy for other groups, the Pakistani army sought to murder every Hindu, regardless of age, gender, political beliefs, or actions. The military leadership was under the impression once the top leaders of Awami League and the Bengali intelligentsia were eliminated, the non-Hindu population can be brought back into the mainstream of United Pakistan. Concomitantly, it held the view that completely ridding East Pakistan of the Hindu presence will be beneficial for the idea of a united Pakistan. Although in reality Hindus posed no such threat. This propaganda is very similar to the anti-Semitic propaganda carried out under the Nazi regime. In both the cases, the minority groups were systematically targeted. But the manner in which the deaths were carried out were completely different. One of the main reasons for setting up the death centers by the Nazis was due to the complaints from the army formation commanders that regular soldiers detested the killing of women and children when ordered to do so on the Eastern Front. Orders to execute unarmed civilians was having an adverse effect on their morale. Some soldiers even committed suicide as these killings led to an acute depression. Therefore, it was decided that the death factories will be set up to make killings more effective. At the same time, only a few soldiers will have to be spared for carrying out these killings. Once the camps were set up, the killings were carried out by handpicked men from the highly fanatical groups of the SS officers and soldiers, most of whom had been a part of Hitler Youth and brainwashed from an early age, which led to a moral disengagement and blaming of Jewish victims themselves for the killings. Later, during the trial, some of the guards said they felt it was their duty to kill Jews. It would have been wrong on their part if they did not do so. In contrast to the regular German soldiers, the Pakistan army showed no hesitation or penitence during the burn and kill missions. The regular soldiers of the Pakistan army had the same zeal and mindset to carry out these killings as the German SS. The fight for the Bangladeshi people was for having access to the resources, which was ironically found in East Pakistan and was used by West Pakistan for earning most of its foreign exchange. Moreover, right for better healthcare, right to access of better education facilities, and most importantly, the right for a greater say in political discourse of their country. The Pakistani junta did not just want the Bengalis not to have these rights, but to eliminate them completely, especially the Hindus, as they thought that it was the Hindus who were indirectly responsible for these demands. Witnesses and victims often narrated that the soldiers enjoyed being part of these killings. Sidney H. Scanberg's report, which narrated the Bangladesh carnage, was published in New York Times on 7th April. In this, he gave a detailed account of the foreign evacuees, of Pakistan Army's atrocities, on the innocent civilians, burning of slums, houses, torture, arson, looting. Here, one foreign evacuee had observed they seem to be enjoying and destroying. Many Bengalis have been killed. In the river just 4 days ago, you could count 400 bodies floating in one area. Unquote. I particularly mention this quote because it comes from a neutral observer, an American residing in Dhaka at the time. Other foreign witnesses also endorsed his view. The army could have let a lot of refugees cross over to India, but that did not happen. The soldiers went out of the way to kill unarmed refugees before they would cross over to India. In a lot of cases, the refugees were shot near the border while crossing to India. It would have been easier for the Pakistan army to let them escape. However, they did not choose this small act of mercy. Many Hindus in the Dinajpur district offered to convert to Islam to save their lives. The Pakistani soldiers didn't accept this offer either. The second group of perpetrators were the local collaborators or Razakars. The fulcrum of the group was formed by the non-Bengali speaking Muslims. The ordinary Razakars came from the lower strata of the society, and they were paid militia group working for the Pakistani state. They had joined hands with the Pakistani army for a paltry stipend and an opportunity to loot the more affluent Bengalis. Yet, the question arises, why is it that the Pakistani junta did not find it hard to recruit ordinary people who were willing to pick up guns and kill their neighbors for small sums of money and in cases only for sadistic pleasure? Under the present Sheikh Hasina government, many local collaborators have been hanged for their involvement in the 1971 killings. Despite these executions, the wounds haven't still healed. The Simla Accord ensured the return of Pakistani prisoners in 1974. Sadly, none of the Pakistani officers were ever tried for crimes against humanity. Now the planners and mid-level bureaucrats are dead. We may never find out the thought process behind their actions. The failure of the world community to try them for crimes has only emboldened Pakistan army to perpetually subdue the demands of rights by other ethnic groups with similar brutalities. We are witnessing the same in Balochistan and Gilgit-Baltistan. Does the Pakistani ruling class still harbor such hostilities towards anyone who does not share their views on the idea of Pakistan? The complete whitewash of the genocide, blaming of India and Bengali Hindus for the defeat indicates this. We might be striving for a lasting peace in the region, but as Plato had once quoted, only the dead have seen the end of war. So I just end with this.
Thank you, Rizit. Now we will release the book. I request Professor Rajveer Sharma, please join us to release the book. So please come over. Professor Rajveer Sharma retired from DU Political Science. He is our academic committee member at IPF. Now I request Mr. Hussain to please come and address us. He has taken part in that liberation of Bangladesh, and he's here.
For distinguished gathering and Dr. Kuldeep, Ratnu, Ambassador Dina Sikri, writer of the book, Editor R.P. Singh, Hitesh Singh, and Professor Sharma. And let me express my gratitude to India Policy Foundation for inviting Bangladesh or getting Bangladesh High Commission involved in the most in the release of this book, The Role of Pakistan Army in Bangladesh Genocide. December in Bangladesh, it is known as the month of victory. We call it a month of victory because just on 16 December 1971, at the end of the 9-month War of Liberation, we got the mighty Pakistani army under the leadership of General A.K. Niazi. There were more than 99,000 of them. They finally surrendered to the joint command of Bangladesh, Indian Army and Bangladesh Mukti Force at Dhaka's then racecourse Maidan. Now it is called Suravarti Uddan. So that was the formal end of the 9-month bloody war. And when this genocide was carried out by the brutal Pakistan army. I was just 18 years old at that time and just got admitted into Dhaka University. And those are the days when no youth could get himself or herself away from the center of the political agitation that has been going on for months before the actual War of the Liberation started. So you are part of that as a young college student and university students. And on the 25th of March, when this Operation Searchlight was launched, I was in Dhaka, and we were, since March 1, when Yahya Khan suddenly declared that the parliament will not sit and it has been postponed indefinitely because Bhutto threatened that if the parliament sits, then there will be bloodbath and mass killing in West Pakistan. So Yahya Khan listened to Bhutto's threat. Of course, it was pre-planned. Yahya Khan also, that was a part of a conspiracy that they will be doing it through Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who People's Party won the majority in the Pakistan. While in East Pakistan, it has already been told that the Awami League, led by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, they won most of the seats except 2, I guess. So it was pre-planned, and then 1st of March there was that sudden announcement, and Dhaka then immediately turned to a sea of protests. People came out spontaneously into the streets, and then quickly it spread throughout across the nation, across the country. And since 1st of March, there was almost every day the protest. Not every day, there's everyday protest, and people were on the streets. They were on the streets even during the night. And on 7th March, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, addressed one of the largest public gathering in our history. Again, that was the racecourse Maidan, and delivered his historic 7th March, in which he virtually declared the War of Independence. And then again he wanted a negotiated settlement of the crisis. It was there from 3rd week of March, when Yahya Khan finally went to Dhaka, and later he was joined by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and Bangabandhu sat with them and tried to have a negotiated settlement. But of course, he never conceded his main demand that Bengalis who voted for Awami League, they must be given the right to rule Pakistan. Must be given the right to rule Pakistan. That would have been for the first time that a free and fair election was held, and Bengalis who comprised the majority of the Pakistan population at that time, their leader will be at the helm of power, which Pakistanis never wanted. As has been said, that Pakistani rulers, especially the Punjabis, they considered East Pakistan as their colony and a field of exploitation. So they would never do that. They basically bought time in the name of talks, in the name of trying to find out a solution. And those days they utilized to fly in more troops to Dhaka and in the preparation of the Operation Searchlight on the night of 25th March 1971, and we call it the Black Night of 25th March. The genocide that the book has narrated, in fact, started from that night, and thousands of people were killed. The Pakistani army, they targeted mainly our, they used to call it EPR, East Pakistan Rifles, which later turned into BDR and then now BGB. That was in Pilkhana. They targeted our police headquarters, and they targeted another important place of source of protest with the Dhaka University. And even inside Dhaka University, they targeted one dormitory that is called Jagannath Hall, and mainly the dormitory for Hindu students. And as we got to know that something is going to happen, because Yahya Khan and Bhutto secretly left Dhaka, and so the words went around, then there is going to something is going to happen, and if that happens, that will be on this night. In the evening, as I was very much involved into sort of a political protest, demonstration, activism, our leaders quietly informed us that don't stay in the university campus, try to find out your own shelter. So a group of students, our activists, about 20 of us, we took shelter in a house close to the university campus, Dhaka University campus, and from there we witnessed the brutality of Pakistan army. We witnessed the tanks rolling into the streets, the rocket launchers lightening the sky of Dhaka, and arson and attacks raised on the Dhaka University campus because we are very close to it, and also the attacks on the police headquarters and the Pilkhana, which were not far away from the place we were hiding. Still, from there, we tried to do something. We tried to resist, and we took preparation to make Molotov cocktails. Those were the days, we, the students or the activists, we started learning, how to make this Molotov cocktails and the bombs, homemade bombs. We tried to do something, but they were attacking us with tanks. And tanks are quite new to us at that time. We could judge automatic rifles, but tanks, they even entered the narrow streets of the city, not the main roads only. So the whole, and all this carnage and the killings and the arson, this took place when Dhaka was placed under curfew. And not only Dhaka, later came to know that most major cities of the country were placed under curfew. So after 3 days of continuous curfew, when it was lifted for only 2 hours, when we came out and we started, along with tens of thousands of city residents leaving the city, on way we saw all the bodies, the streets littered with bodies. We passed through the Jagannath Hall, where we also saw bodies and a trail of destruction, arson. And later we came to know that more than 2 dozens of students at Jagannath Hall itself, they were lined up. Some of them were my classmates also. Some of them were my elder brothers. They were lined up and killed in brush fires and buried in mass grave there. One of them, or couple of them, survived pretending that they were dead in the heaps of bodies. So those are since then, throughout the 9 months, there have been these killings, carnage. Along with that killings, as it has been said, then came the rapes of the women, burning of the houses, and forcing people, to flee for their lives to India. And India, we are grateful to India that they provided shelter to more than 10 million refugees. Apart from the vital support of training the Mukti Bahinis, giving full all-out support to our diversion war, especially from December 3, and to start a war which ended only in 12 days in the Eastern Front. So that was it. That was it, And interestingly, what I want to point out here, and also the book has touched on that part, the Pakistani rulers, even today, they felt no remorse for this genocide that they have carried out. Even today, Pakistanis, they are not offering any formal apology, not a formal apology for what they did. Rather, when our Awami government, under the leadership of our current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, in the year 2010, started the long awaited trial of the war criminals, of the collaborators, the leader of the Rajakars, Al-Badr, Al-Sams, who had collaborated with Pakistan Army. They started the trial of those collaborators with the war criminals and put them a special tribunal, put them, put more than a dozen of them to gallows. Pakistanis started protesting. They even took resolution in parliament condemning this trial and openly supporting these war criminals again. So that is Pakistan. That's is their real, the character they show, especially with regard to Bangladesh War of Liberation. And so I agree with one contention of the book that has been written, I think, at the beginning, as I got it from the excerpts, that when Pakistan today, on many occasions, raised the issue of human rights, this becomes to us, it's so ironic. They make themselves, or expose their own misdeeds, that we can only ridicule them, we can laugh at them, because the word human rights or, or any human values do not really go with the Pakistani rulers even today. Because Pakistan, even if they have a civilian government today, but it is, we all know, is the military behind that government, and this same they are carrying the legacy of the Pakistani military junta that has unleashed this genocide in Bangladesh. Then East Pakistan was turned into Bangladesh, and they never really confessed to their crimes. On the other hand, they kept conspiring, hatching conspiracy to undo the government of Bangladesh, the government of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the government of Awami League. And it was later proved that the ISI, along with some other international spy agencies, are very much involved in the killing of Bangabandhu, in the assassination of Bangabandhu, father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, on the night of August 15, 1975. And when this assassination was done, Pakistanis restarted their one proposal through Jamaat-e-Islami and its leader now had Jamaat-e-Islami Professor Ghulam Azam, that there should be a confederation of Bangladesh with Pakistan. They started a campaign, global campaign, especially in the Middle Eastern countries, the Muslim majority countries. And for 21 years, since the assassination of Bangabandhu and until the Awami League under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the illustrated daughter of Bangabandhu, came to power, they dreamt of turning Bangladesh into a Pakistan-style state, which they failed to do because the people of Bangladesh, they voted again, voted Awami League back to power, and Awami League is now in power under the dynamic leadership of our Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, and she has been, or her government One of the biggest achievements, as I told you, is putting the war criminals to trial despite resistance from some Western quarters who were misled or misguided by the lobby, which is still very strong, very powerful with money and resources. But we know, we have our belief that they will not succeed. I won't take much time. Thank Brigadier R.P. Singh for writing this book, and we know that there are several war veterans in India who are writing their experience, who are writing about the war of liberation of Bangladesh. Sometimes I feel that they write more or they talk more than we even write in Bangladesh. So that's a very good sign, even though Dr. Kuldeep at the beginning said many of this generation may not know the exact picture of the atrocities that were carried out by Pakistan during those 9 months in particular. But the more the time flies, the more are being said about the war of liberation in both sides, in India, in Bangladesh, and we welcome such discussions, talks about the liberation war and the friendship between India and Bangladesh. That was the foundation of which was laid in particular during this war of liberation, and which have now grown into a stage or blossomed into a stage, we called it a very golden chapter in our relationships, and we hope that this cordial, warm relationship will continue. And with the continuation of this cordial relationship, with the growth of this relationship further, we will both benefit. The people of Bangladesh and India will both benefit from this relationship. Thank you once again for giving me the chance to brief you on this occasion.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Farid Hussain. As I mentioned in the beginning, Mr. Hussain is Minister Press in Bangladesh High Commission. He gave us his precious time, despite you can say some disturbances in Delhi, and agreed to be part of this particular event to release the booklet. We are grateful to him. Thank you very much, sir. As I mentioned, and the writers have also highlighted, the biggest sufferer of this particular genocide in all conflicts, basically, we have seen the women are the main sufferer. They lose their parents, they lose their children, they lose their husbands, they lose their brothers, they lose their dignity, they lose properties, they lose everything. This barbarianism of inflicting pain and brutalities on helpless women, there is a history. It wasn't, you can say, recorded anywhere. When the Indian states used to fight amongst each other, there were clearly defined codes of conduct. After sunset, you should not touch a woman, you should not touch a child, you should not hit when a person is running away from you, never hit on the back. But when the barbarians started attacking Indian subcontinent in the beginning of the second millennia, Indians didn't know how to react. Because they were killing kids, they were harming, they were taking women as slaves and inflicting all kinds of brutalities on children, on women, on even elderly people. As science progressed and humanity got in touch with each other and such brutalities were reported and read by and discussed, we thought you can say those days of medieval brutalities have been over. But Bangladesh genocide and then the brutalities on Yazidi women in recent times remind us that that barbaric mentality is still alive, and humanity must resist with all its might to curb, you can say, not only resist and to curb and to punish all such tendencies which feel that in any conflict target the women. We have amongst us Ambassador Veena Sikri. She was Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh from 2003 to 2006. I request you, ma'am, please come and give your address. Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear friends. I'd like to thank the India Policy Foundation for arranging this function and for inviting me to speak on this occasion. I'd like to thank Dr. Kuldeep Ratnu and Professor Rajvi Sharma. I'd like to thank the authors, particularly Brigadier R.K. Singh and Hitesh Singh, for bringing out this excellent publication. And I'd like to thank Mr. Farid Hussain, Minister Press from the High Commission of Bangladesh, for being here and for giving us his very vivid personal interpretation, his personal involvement in the liberation war of Bangladesh. I certainly think that this liberation war of Bangladesh has been one of the most cataclysmic events, not only in the South Asian subcontinent, but also worldwide. I think that it is an event that has been greatly understudied. It has not been studied enough. Rather, there's been an attempt to push everything under the carpet, as we heard that the strong protest by Pakistan, even on the war crimes trial. And I think that today, as all of us are preparing for the 50th anniversary of the liberation war of Bangladesh. In less than 2 years from now, in December 2021, we'll have the 50th anniversary of the Bangladesh liberation war. And our two governments, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we have already agreed that this will be a joint celebration. This will be a grand occasion to commemorate what India and Bangladesh have done together. We have to be very clear in our minds that the liberation war of Bangladesh was first and foremost the success and the victory of the people of Bangladesh, because it is they who decided in their own minds that they could not stay with Pakistan anymore, that Pakistan had heaped too many insults and too much humiliation, too much economic deprivation. They were trying to, in fact, inflict already a cultural genocide on Bangladesh by not even allowing them to have Bengali as a national language of the state of Pakistan, and not even banning Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, banning his works, and not allowing them to at all in any way live their cultural identity and follow the way of life that had been there for millennia. That is a part and parcel of the people of East Pakistan, people of Bengal, as such, who have lived together as friends for all these millennia. And then when the crunch came, I think the leadership of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is something that galvanized the whole people of Bangladesh, of East Pakistan. I think this is something tremendous, and it is quite remarkable that not only he was able to lead the people of Bangladesh, galvanize them, but even when he was arrested and taken away to West Pakistan and spent all the 9 months there, even there, then under his leadership, in his memory, in his, whatever he had, the 6 points that he had given to East Pakistan, and the demands that they had made on West Pakistan, the 6-point program, the victory in the Agartala conspiracy case, and when they tried to impose on Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman the charges of sedition. The whole country as one rose up, and in the end the government of West Pakistan had to drop the case because of the great popular. So all this, the tremendous leadership of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is something that we must remember. And in fact it is an amazing coincidence, it is a historical coincidence that we are also going to be celebrating the centenary of the birth of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So this year, 2021, from March 2020 to March 2021 is going to be the centenary celebrations of the birth of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and also at the same time the golden jubilee of the War of Liberation. And since Bangladesh and India today, we have this absolutely, I would say, a real golden era in the relationship, a very strong, powerful rapport between our leaders, between the governments, between the people of India and Bangladesh. I think it really does behove us to work seriously on this aspect, on the aspect of the liberation war and the unfinished business of the liberation war, where the people who have been responsible for those crimes have not yet they are identified but not been exactly identified or brought to book. I think we have to really give full credit to the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, that she has carried forward the tradition of her father, her very distinguished father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and carried forward this feeling for freedom, for independence, for nationalism of Bangladesh. And she has, at all risk to her government, to herself, and in the face of international opposition from some key quarters, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and so on, she has gone ahead and done the war crimes trial. I think the strength of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in doing this is really underestimated, because it requires a very strong willpower and a very strong leadership to carry this forward to its logical conclusion. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, as Prime Minister of Bangladesh, had himself tried. The commission had been set up, but the work could not be really started. And then he was brutally assassinated. And for the next 15, 16 years, there was a complete effort, as we have just heard, even to bring back a confederation of Bangladesh and Pakistan. So nothing could happen, but then in 1996, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was elected for the first time as Prime Minister, she again restarted the effort and again identified at that time the killers of her father, of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and started the process, but it could not be completed. But now this whole process has been carried to its logical conclusion, and the war crime trial tribunals have been working very actively. They have not only given the judgment, but the judgments have been carried out, and many people, including leaders of Jamaat-e-Islami and so many others, have received the ultimate death penalty and have been put to death. So I think this is something that Bangladesh has really enormously been successful, and we must credit the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for that. And I think that having done that for Bangladesh, the remaining portion is now the war crime trial of the people who were from Pakistan, who did the crimes in Bangladesh, but have never been tried for it. And as we have read in the book, and we know that there has been there was the effort at that time. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto promised he will do this and that and have a judicial commission. And here I think we also need to look at even the Hamudur Rahman Commission report, because there was a commission set up in Pakistan, the Hamudur Rahman Commission. There was a report, there was a preliminary report in 1972, and later in 1974 there was what was described as a supplementary report. But that report was quite clear, although it tried to be watered down. The 74 version was possibly a watered down version, and even now it's not so easy to get the full text of that. And the full text of the 72 report is just, I think, not available at all. But the issues have been highlighted in that report. So you cannot say that they have not been recognized even by the people of Bangladesh. The issues of the rapes, It's called licentiousness and immoral acts, and the word rape is also used once or twice in that report. The killing of unarmed civilians, the brutality of the killings, the killing of the minorities. These issues have been mentioned, and some of the people have been. So I think that, having got that, which was never, of course, implemented or just put on the shelf, there is a very good time now to work on this. Colonel Sajjad Zahid, I think Hitesh mentioned his name, and Shahryar Kabir, they've all done tremendous work. The Liberation War Museum, which has now got a new building and a new establishment in Dhaka, a wonderful new building, has also done tremendous work. So I think this is the time for not only the scholars of both sides, but also the governments to decide that we need to carry this forward and to see, particularly I would think, on the atrocities against women, the rape, the killing, the idea of racial inferiority, the idea of changing the racial dynamics of a group of people through this. So that the rape was not only brutal and sadistic, but it also had some very demented design about it. That there would all be these children born who would not then be Bengali anymore, and the situation of the Biranganas is really heartrending. And it is time that this was brought out. There have been a few books written on it, largely in the Bengali language, very few in English. But I think that this too needs to be brought out very clearly and documented, and the individual stories, the sequence of events, all this needs to be brought out very clearly. I'm glad that Mr. Hitesh Singh mentioned about the mentality of the people who can do this, because this requires a kind of a training, a kind of a mental indoctrination that is beyond belief. And to see that it is being done to millions of people in Bangladesh. Here in India, we have a debate. If there's one incident or one accident or one person who is, not treated quite fairly, it becomes a hue and cry in the Indian media, and there's a lot of talk about it. Who did the police? Who was the police excesses? Who ordered it? Who commissioned it? Who did this? All for one or two or three people, or maybe even 5 or 10 or 100. But here you're talking of millions. And these millions of unsung people, they have been the heroes of the war of liberation. And I think the dimensions of the war, the gigantic scale on which it was conducted, the oppression of the people of Bangladesh, this is really not really come out at all on the dimensions that it should have. So I think this is a time that we should, and maybe the India Policy Foundation should think about it, or maybe talk to the people in the government about it. But certainly, very quickly, a plan needs to be made. Otherwise, the next year and a half, almost 2 years, will go past. And this opportunity, if it is missed, then certainly it will be a great lack. And I know that in Bangladesh, under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, there is a continuing interest, there's continuing activity. The list of Razakars is now proposed to be published. It came out, but then there were problems, it's been withdrawn. But certainly, the hope is that by March 26th of 2020, it will be republished. And I think that that's another important step to look at all the collaborators. And when you're doing all this within Bangladesh, then certainly it's time to go back and go back to the original question of those 195 prisoners of war who were then sent back. And why were they sent back? And that the time is now maybe to look at the question of trying them or identifying their crimes, and looking and recognizing that those crimes were done. And even if some of them, of course, as we know, are no longer in this world, but even then, the dimensions of the situation that happened in the atrocities against the minorities. I mean, to see that it was a kind of a genocide, which was not only it was on the Bengali people as a whole. Bengali people of East Pakistan, but the minorities were singled out among them and taken as a special target, saying that this is because the problem in East Pakistan is because of the minorities, because they are with India, or some that kind of a mentality was sought to be created. So people who were just living their normal lives and with their land or their work or their education were just singled out. And Jagannath Hall, as Mr. Freed had mentioned, was a special target. It is now, I think, a separate university, even to the deemed university of its own. But it really has been one of the greatest victims in this thing. So I think and then the whole aspect of targeting the intellectuals, the professionals, the doctors, so that a country which is about to be born will be without any sustenance, without any strength to go on, to run itself, and will collapse of it. That was the objective. And to even think of the mentality with which such an objective is planned is something that is scary to even think that you can have a mentality like this to target these groups of people. In Bangladesh, Martyred Intellectuals Day is still celebrated every year, observed every year with great sorrow and great fervor, just as 21st February is observed as Mother Language Day. And when the language and the people who died in maintaining, in wanting to have Bengali as a language of the state of Pakistan, that too. So these memories are there, and we must thank Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who has brought back the original history of the Liberation War. And this was not there, I think, between 1975 and I would say 1996 definitely, or maybe even 2000, till she came back to power in 2009, a second time as Prime Minister, where the serious efforts are now being made that even school children should know and should know the correct what happened, how it was the people of Bangladesh, and in their support, the government and people of India, the Indian army came and supported them and trained them and was fully able. The joint command was there. The victory was of the joint command. The surrender was to the joint command. So I think these aspects, which are now very much in the psyche of every child, every young person in Bangladesh, should also be there in India, in our country. And as we observe the golden jubilee of the liberation war of Bangladesh in India, we should have a joint celebration with Bangladesh. We should have our own celebration with India. We should plan the celebrations very systematically, very seriously, right from now, so that by the time of December 2021, we are able to put these things and bring the real truth out before the world. There is actually very little time. It does take a very long time to do all this. But I think that there are institutions in India and in Bangladesh. I mentioned the Liberation War Museum and some individuals. They have done the work. The material is available and it could be put together and brought forward. I'm sure the government of India and Bangladesh will support each other and support the efforts of such institutions on doing this. Once again, I'd like to congratulate Brigadier Singh and Hitesh Singh for writing this book. I believe you are planning a serial or TV serial. Maybe that is another thing that should happen before on the occasion of 2021, the Golden Jubilee. And I thank the audience for being here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ambassador CP. This particular booklet has been released, written by Brigadier R.P. Singh and Mr. Hitesh Singh, as mentioned by Brigadier R.P. Singh. He was the you can say one of the very few officers who was involved in all the stages of that you can say Bangladesh Liberation War, right from setting the civil, you can say helping the civil administration in reception and arrangement of the facilities for the refugees, and then training the Mukti Bahini guerrillas, and then directly taking part in the war as an Indian Army officer. So he has that, you can say, first-hand account of all the problems, and particularly the people he met and the scenario and the destruction which he witnessed. Not only you can say by talking to people and while you can say carrying out the operations inside Bangladesh. So I would recommend you can have a copy of the book from outside. Now we will be, you can say after the program we'll be having a tea on the ground floor just behind. I request Professor Rajveer Sharma ji to please give his vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Esteemed distinguished guests, Mr. Hussain, the authors of the book, Madam Sikri, Dr. Ratnu, and the most important distinguished gathering. It is my proud privilege to put a vote of thanks to all of you who spared their time to come and listen to a very important kind of discussion on a very important theme, despite the fact that today, in fact, was somewhat an uncertain day because of some kind of problems in some parts. But still, we managed to come here and listen to the distinguished guests. I think it is one of the very important times in our history where we did share the agonies, the pains of our neighbors, and we really discharged our humanitarian kind of responsibility to our neighbors. And till date, we are sharing that kind of a cultural affinity and also the affinity of human values. And Madam Sikri was right that it is the appropriate and opportune time to celebrate the creation of Bangladesh together. And celebrations are celebrations, and everyone should be happy. So once again, with these words, I extend my thanks to all of you on behalf of India Policy Foundation and on behalf of all of us. Thank you so much.